Good evening and welcome to the Williamson County Native Plant Society meeting, November 13th. It's always good to check. Um, so yep, tonight will be John Hart Asher with the Pocket Prairie presentation, Intro to Pocket Prairies. But first, we do have some slides to go through. There we go. So tonight's plants, as you already saw, we've got quite a variety. I only showed pictures for the ones that we don't have currently in Wilkoscape. So if you wanted to find out more about the rest of the plants, aside from the longleaf buckwheat, the cardinal flower, and the Trans-Pecos spiderwort, do check out Wilkoscape. Habitat information, water needs, exposure needs for the plants. So longleaf buckwheat, does well in a variety of soils, prairie, rocky soils, low water, sun, part shade, so a pretty versatile plant. Cardinal flower, you're going to need to baby that one. It needs more water than our typical happy plants around here, but of course it's beautiful. So moist, wet soil, shade, sun. If you're in sun, you're going to need more water for it. And the Trans-Pecos spiderwort, thank you, Sue Wiseman, for bringing that. Part shade, it said on the wildflower website, dry, moist, perennial, but a spring ephemeral. So it'll do well in spring and then sort of go to ground like maybe the other spiderworts.
It only stays longer.
Okay.
It's in their 20, they're all year long.
Okay.
But they'll start.
Okay.
But just keep it a little moist and it'll come back and it'll be beautiful and.
Okay.
The deer.
Okay. So for those of you at home, the Trans-Pecos spiderwort, the deer enjoy it, but it also does really well in hanging baskets.
So like purple heart or warning Jude's very close related.
Okay, very good. And again, Wilkoscape, if you're in Williamson County, this is the place to go if you're thinking about converting to native plants. Please use it. Use the QR code. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about upping your native plant game. We've got some upcoming programs. Next up here, next month, December 11th, is our annual holiday party. We've got our silent auction. We're going to have food by Little Lemon is the caterer, cheese, charcuterie, dessert. Please do bring items for the silent auction. It took me a couple years to figure out that all the items came from members. They didn't magically appear. So please, check your closets, bring stuff in. It's a fun time. Puzzles are a big hit, art, crafts. Pecans are a usual arrival that comes in. So please do bring items for the silent auction. Bid sheets will be here, and you come a little early and we can get those filled out and arranged, and it'll be a good time. It is a good time. Oh, wait a second. Yep. So other speakers in the future that we have. Okay. Again, holiday party, snacks, good. Desserts are fantastic. So please do come, bring items for the silent auction. Upcoming field trips, oh my goodness, November 16th. So Godwin Preserve Plant Survey, right around the corner. Please come attend that. I guess more information on our website, and it's a fantastic time. And other events coming up, November 30th, the Jim Rogers Trail hike, 1:30 to 4:30, and we're still building the suspense for the New Year's walk. All right, so we're still building that up. Don't worry, it's going to be fantastic. One of the latest field trips was to Berry Springs Park and Preserve. We walked through the new portion of the trail that was recently opened. We were able to see the new visitor center, but it wasn't open when we were there, but it's fantastic. We were able to see plants that we had planted. I think it was the spring of 2019, the last little gasp before everything shut down. And we saw our caged little trees hanging in there and doing well. So many various species were observed, many pollinators. About 11 of us were on the field trip. And I think that's a fuzzy bean in the lower right corner, Strophostyles. That's what iNaturalist said. So there we go. So yeah, thank you, Cindy Chrysler, for leading that hike and keeping us all together. Hey, it's never too early to plan. Get it on your calendar. Saturday, March 28th is going to be our spring plant sale. So think about volunteering already and let Nancy Pumphrey know. That'd be super fantastic, right there in red. Hey, this Sunday, oh my goodness, you can go to the landfill in the morning and then you can go and hike in the afternoon. You can make it a full day with wonderful other Williamson County NIPSOT folks. So you don't need to register, show up, and it'll be good. Gary will be there.
I was going to say, if you were ever thinking about coming to volunteer at the landfill pollinator gardens, this Sunday would be a great time because we have around, what, Nancy, 20, 30 plants that need to go in the ground. So bring a shovel and some water.
37 according to this. 37.
And 47.
37, thank you.
So a plea from Gary Bowers for our at-home viewership. If you can make it out to the landfill on Sunday, there are 37 plants that need to be planted. Bring a shovel, bring water for yourself as well as for the plants. It would be very much appreciated. An attendee, actually 2 attendees, will each win a book at tonight's meeting. Hopefully you picked up a card on the way in. Nature's Best Hope, and then the book. Oh, good. That looks a little larger up there. The Ecology and Management of Prairies in the Central United States. The book suggested by our speaker tonight. So that one will be sent to you. So if you do win that one, make sure that I have your address so I can get it sent to you. Apparently it does work, sending books. So that's good. Okay. And the usual information, please do check out our website, subscribe to our blog, check us out on Facebook to keep up on what's going on in the chapter. And yeah, always take note of where our meetings are going to be. We're definitely going to be here in December. But I think I said that one other time, and then we had to change within 48 hours. So always check those blog posts, check the website. We do a really good job of getting the information out if there is any last minute change. All right. Okay, so tonight's presentation is Intro to Pocket Prairies with John Hart Asher. Tonight's speaker, John Hart Asher, is Senior Environmental Designer and Principal at Blackland Collaborative Ecological Restoration and Design. He has over 14 years experience helping restore prairies, and he and his partners, Michelle Bertelson and Emily Manderson, have helped impact over 90,000 acres of Texas landscape alone. His main interest is the application of ecological design, resulting in functional, sustainable landscapes within urban ecologies. A few of his current projects include tallgrass prairie restoration in an urban riparian corridor, native prairie green roof design, residential pocket prairies, sustainable roadsides, and green infrastructure. In 2019, he also stepped in to serve as host of the nationally syndicated PBS show, Central Texas Gardener. So if he looks familiar, there's a reason. And yes, he has a pocket prairie in his own yard. So tonight's speaker, John Hart Asher.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming to listen to a fellow plant nerd talk about pocket prairies. I'm going to briefly just go through some of our work that we've done at Blackland Collaborative. Like I said, it's myself and Michelle and Emily. We were both, we were part of the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center's landscape restoration program for quite a number of years. In 2020, the executive director at the time decided to dissolve our program. So we said we are really committed to all this work. We want to keep on keeping on. And so that's when we formed as a private entity. So we're going to go through a lot of stuff. I might run a little long. I will try to get through it. It's to quote Samuel L. Jackson in Jurassic Park, hold on to your butts. So pocket prairies we'll get to, but really quickly, just again, a background about Blackland Collaborative. Our work optimizes the ecological, environmental, and sociological function of landscapes. And why is that important? Because we have a lot of people come up to us and say, how do you restore the landscape? And there's a million ways to go at it. So oftentimes there's layers or higher sort of ecological functional goals that we want to ask them about as the client. Is it cleaning stormwater? Is it carbon sequestration? Heat island mitigation is really important in urban areas. Is it habitat creation? There's a lot of things we'll go to, but we really want to focus on some of that function because that's the key. It's not just putting in a prairie for a prairie's sake. It's what sort of relationship do we want to have with these landscapes, because they are in fact working landscapes. They're absolutely amazing. And so we will start with that, but we also really are adamantly supportive of the fact that landscapes and people belong together. We for too long, conservation was about people over here and then this fence off this area and don't let people go over there because the plants are over there. And that's really a disservice. And we'll get into certain reasons why, but we really want to bring nature and people home together, because people at the end will only conserve what they know and they love, right? And so right now people go out there, they see a bunch of green junk and they think that that's natural. Well, technically it's natural, but it's usually going to be compromised. Its biodiversity levels are going to be quite low. It's not going to be doing any of the functions or very minimum of functions that I just mentioned. So we need to reconnect with nature. There's a lot of information about how much of a positive impact psychologically and physiologically that landscapes do for us. So that's a big goal. While at the Wildflower Center, I mentioned we had a model that was research, teach, and apply. So we did several rounds of research, including the prescribed fire program. Thankfully, that program's still in existence. It is the longest running prescribed burn program in the world. It basically, we looked at if you return fire to the land and you're not adding seed or anything else, but if you add this disturbance back into the landscape at different times of the year, is that enough to push the landscape back towards a more biodiverse or restore that landscape? And there's some really great data that's been taken years to accumulate all this stuff. And that's the thing about some of the research with ecology, is that you can't go out there and get a sample for a year and then know that you have a trend, a true trend. These are decades, if not more, in the making. So it's in almost, I think it's 30th year now. It started in 1999, 2000, when the Wildflower Center became the Wildflower Center in its new location, where it is now, versus when it was the National Wildflower Research Center that was in East Austin. It was about 60 acres that Mrs. Johnson and Helen Hayes founded. So we did a number of other research. We did habiturf, so we developed a native turf mix because people wanted lawns. We also did a lot of low impact development, so that's how do you treat stormwater on site as opposed to just piping it off, looking at water as a resource. So research was really integral as part of our function. Another a bit of research we did were green roofs. So earlier today, actually, I was installing one at a client's house in near Bee Cave. But a lot of green roof manufacturers reached out to us while we were at the center because the green roofs were failing here. Anybody want to guess why? It's hot as hell. It's really, really hot. And so the technology that they were putting in was developed in temperate climates. So Germany, the UK, well, they brought that over and they put it in Chicago and New York, and hey, it was doing all right. But they brought it down here and it just failed. And part of that's because there was an overemphasis on non-native sedums, which really require the temperatures to drop below 80 degrees Fahrenheit at night for them to do one part of their photosynthetic cycle. And guess what happens in the summer a lot in Texas? It ain't dropping below 80. So the other part was there was so much internal heat gain because the engineers developed a drainage system that allowed an air gap within the media, and it was allowing that to heat up to 95 degrees plus Fahrenheit. And that's right up next to your roots, and the roots don't ever experience heat. So it's sort of a 1-2 thing. This was our first project outside of the research. We did about 9 years of green roof research where we came up with a growing medium, redesigned it, and then said, we can solve this with native plants. We really think we can. So we put prairies on tops of buildings now. This is called Edgeland. This is actually a house. This is a former pipeline site. The architects took a cue when the client actually dug out the decommissioned pipeline, and there's a line in the earth, and they said, well, why don't we look at like the Native American pit houses? And then they went down this big thing, but they came up with a green roof. So one of the architects I'd been in graduate school with, and she said, hey, we're wanting to do this project. What do you think? And I said, you architects have all chosen all the wrong plants, but we can help you. So architects, may less than that, are not really good with plants, but if you know plant nerds, you're doing all right. So this is the first one. It's the owner is a lawyer and a science fiction author, right? Only in Austin. So this is really great. We restored 4 acres of Blackland Prairie around it, and then the ground plane becomes the roof. If you have Apple TV, there's a series called Home, and in the first season they do a whole little movie on it. It's really wonderful. It's a love story between Chris and his wife Augustina. But this was really where we started to take off. So this is part of the research, then becomes the apply. And we really felt that we were the Wildflower Center outside the Wildflower Center's walls. But this is a green roof we did. There's downtown Austin. We did about 13,000 square feet of prairie restoration on this block. And that's a pool house. So we had about an 800 square foot green roof that we did to mimic. And so for all of these, we look at and research the historic climax plant condition, and then we will try to bring that back. We don't just have a green roof mix that we put there. We really try to tailor it to the site. And again, this sort of shows you how it goes. So there's 2 types of green roofs. There's extensive and intensive. Intensive is like 6 feet of stuff. We're not, you can plant a tree in that. We're not looking at that because it costs so much to support all that weight. That's not an option. But extensive green roofs, or maybe where you're putting, we call them 5 to 12 inches. I think there's an official designation, but our roofs are about anywhere from 5 to 12 inches. And if you're building a new building or a new structure, it doesn't really add a lot to the cost to support that weight. So here you can see this is Camp Young Judea outside of Wimberley. And there you can see there's the waterproofing. We've put in our media, and there it's growing in. They got little green fuzzies. There's about 3 months out, and that's about 6 months or so. And then I've got better pictures. I don't know why I chose that, but it's mainly just a process to see how it grows in. Another project we did was the Bush Presidential Center. I don't know if y'all have ever gone on up there in Dallas. It's next to SMU campus, but it's 16 acres of restored tallgrass Blackland Prairie. And it's really wonderful because the site really used to be, used to look like that. It was just abused, urban, degraded land. And Mrs. Bush, when they first had the design, it was a big honking building and then a landscape that kind of looked like a park. And Mrs. Bush said they had actually been doing restoration on their ranch out in Crawford, and she said, I want a Texas landscape. And so she had them go back to the drawing board, and we started focusing on, okay, what would that look like? So it's not that it's just a prairie. Remember, I talked about working landscapes. So this is sort of an axonometric drawing, but up the top, I'll show you kind of I don't have those in this talk, but These are parking lots, so all of that water is being harvested from that impervious surface. It comes through pipes and then comes through an engineered seep. So it mimics sort of the seeps that you might see in the hill country. And then that goes through what are called bioswales. So they're these sort of little like creeks, and it comes down to a 250,000 gallon rainwater cistern. So all of our projects have no irrigation on them. We will have temporary irrigation for that first year because we want to mimic a good wet year and get everything established. But outside of that, it's whatever Mother Nature is going to throw at the landscape. They did harvest all this water because we have that ability and we needed to do something. We just didn't want to pipe it off. So they use that to irrigate some of the trees around the landscape. So trees are cool, but grasses and forbs are even cooler. So here's what that looks like actually in person. This front area is all of our habiturf lawn that we helped design at the Wildflower Center. And then in the back's the tall grass prairie. And so in total, it's about 16 acres. There you can see that cistern. But again, it's just a wonderful way that we can look at how do we redefine our urban areas. So they start to swing away from being an environmental antagonist and something that actually functions on multiple levels. And again, working with landscape architects, which I have a background in, they always love to give the clients these really sexy renderings. But this is it's like when you plant a tree, you're not expecting that sapling to be 250 feet tall in a year or two. Same thing with the grasslands. They evolve over time. What is you see above ground biomass is directly related to the soil food web that's developed underneath. And research has demonstrated they can take up to 40 years to where it becomes really fungal dominant or a half fungal bacteria. And that's really what allows some of those later successional species like the big four, big blue stem, little blue stem, switchgrass, Indian grass to really thrive. But they love to show this. And then, it's like, hey guys, this is in the future. You should let them know. But I will say, this is only 5 years. Here's that same view. And that's one of my coworkers, Michelle Bright at the time. Here's a bioswale. So again, it's functioning. It looks really pretty and everything, but it's functioning. It's doing something. But again, in about 5 years, it's really exciting to be able to show those renderings, but then walk the walk. And as you go through the site, it's changing. Grasslands are dynamic, and that's one of the most difficult things that we'll get into about when you're doing a pocket prairie is how you manage it, because we're so used to flower beds and you put there, and there's so much about control. Pocket prairies and prairie restoration is about stepping back a bit and letting things happen. And that's one of the biggest difficult things we have to deal with when we talk with landscape architects who are like, I want some red swooshies here and give me some blue over here. And I'm like, man, it's just gonna do its thing. You gotta let go a little bit. And so you can see this area again. This is a bioswale here. This is sort of about a couple of years in, but it really changed what was a terribly degraded condition. This is the wildflower meadow. We don't seed the rest of the site for the most part. This gets reseeded every year because if you really want wildflowers blowing up every year, you kind of got to give it a little juice every year or two. Because it tends to become grass dominant over time. And again, these are disturbance-driven ecologies, right? And we'll talk about what that means. This was last year, had a good wet spring, and it was just exploding. And so again, this is really a great example of some of our larger restoration work that we've done in urban areas. And again, as we've mentioned, we've impacted about 90,000 acres of Texas alone, but we have work now in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and in Arkansas for the Walton family. We did a green roof and meadow restoration. So, we really feel that these sort of interventions are a way, again, to redefine our urban condition. And so prairies are really about creative unpredictability, right? You're going to put some things in motion, but again, yes, you're still going to have to exert some control. You have to be the bison, as I'll say, but you can't expect it. It's sort of like having a bad dog or cat, I guess. You love it to death, but it's not going to do what you want it to. all the time. So let's talk about lawns for a minute. So lawns were developed because really rich people owned enough land that they could take land, because all land that humans had beforehand was working land for the most part. They're either hunting on it or they're growing stuff to eat. But when we got really rich people, they started to say, you know what, I can take this land out of working condition and I can just let it be a lawn, doing nothing. And it's sort of a flex, right? I'm so rich that I can afford to do that. I don't have to have my land supporting my family or anything. And when you see some of these formal gardens, they're absolutely beautiful, but they're what I like to call the ascetic aesthetic. They look great, but if you really dig down, are they supporting a caste of pollinators? Usually not, because it's you're planting plants that are from not from that region or even that country, you know. So there's no association with any other critters, and they're just sort of there. They look good, but they're not doing much. But my former director, Mark Simmons, at the Wildflower Center, who wonderful person. He passed away years back, but he's from England. And when he would go home, he started to notice, well, when I look at these shortgrass conditions, though, there is a whole community, right? It's not a monoculture. And in fact, this was his part of his backyard. He started digging down and looking and saying, well, this is actually a vibrant situation. What we have in the United States is we think about monocultures and it just has to be that. And we put so many chemicals and other crap on top of it to try to keep it that one thing. Whereas the lawns actually in the UK, that were culturally, we were taught to say, oh, we want a green landscape all the time and it needs to look perfect all the time. Well, actually they were, you know, quite diverse in their own right. But in the United States, grasslands are a different thing. So if you look at this map, you know, a lot of people initially thought about the prairies as, you know, the central United States. Everybody got that. Okay, there's the prairies, there's wagons going through, all that sort of stuff. But when you really start to look, there are grassland communities all over. The Southeastern Grasslands Initiative is now starting to redefine the Southeast as actually grasslands. I call them pine forests, right? But they're grasslands that happen to have a tree in it. It's the same disturbance-driven ecology. It was fire, it was high-intensity, low-frequency grazing, but it was the biodiversity majority was the herbaceous component. It's just the trees were bigger, so people looked at those and they didn't really look down. And you know, Bill Holm is an author. He has a wonderful quote that I love. It says essentially, you know, the woodsman looks out at a square mile of prairie and sees only grass, but the prairie person looks at a square meter and sees a universe. And that's what we're really trying to plug into. And again, that's starting to connect and understand and be able to really identify and be able to read these landscapes. So there are grasslands all over the United States, even way up into the Northeast. And so grasslands are disturbance-driven ecologies. So drought, so there's abiotic pressures that really control them and why they evolved. They didn't just poof and appear. They evolved over many, many millennia, and that was in relation to some of these abiotic pressures. So drought. So everybody talks about using native plants because they use less water. Why? Because they have extensive root systems, some of which go down 17, 20 feet, and they can deal with that heat. That is a direct evolutionary response to in the middle of the United States to the formation of the Rocky Mountains, creating a rain shadow over the central United States and starting to create more frequent droughts. And the only thing that could really thrive in that were these herbaceous species. So that's one thing. Again, fire. I'll show you a map next of the historic return fire interval, but fire, we still think of fire as bad, but it's just, we didn't understand how important it was with these communities, how it helps prevent woody encroachment, how it helps really revive and recycle nutrients. and help support a whole bunch of critters. I don't know if y'all have ever been on a prescribed burn, but if you have and you hang out there for the next couple of days, you'll never see more life than you've ever seen before. You have raptors swooping in to come get stuff. I've seen woodpeckers eating mice running out to get away from the fire. I mean, the tender shoots start to come up, and so all the ungulates are like, holy moly, we're back in business. So fire is really, it's not a destructive force. You got to think of it more in the sort of Promethean context of it is actually a gift that rejuvenates the landscape. Now, the fires that we have that we're experiencing in California and others, and that everybody's worried about here, is because the vegetation is out of whack, right? We've let the woody encroachment take over. And I'll go off for 50 minutes about that. But essentially, it's out of whack. So those fires that we're seeing now are no way relate to the historic fires. The historic fires are hot and fast. They're in and out. These are super hot, and they sit there and they sterilize the earth. They kill the microbes in the soil. They wipe out your seed bank, and they kill everything there. And that's because we've let this fuel build up for decades and decades and decades because we thought fire was bad, when in fact it was a tool to help keep those fires from being so intense and removing that fuel, but also doing all that other good things. The other thing were ungulates, so high intensity, low frequency grazing. We used to have millions of bison in this area that would come in, and they might not return for 3, 7, 28 random years, just random intervals. But they would tear up trees, they would tear up the soil with their hoofs, they would create these buffalo wallows in the gilgai. They would recycle nutrients when they pee and they poop. They were a huge driver. The other big thing that a lot of people don't talk about are prairie dogs. Prairie dogs are a keystone species. They didn't quite come this far east. They're actually come down to San Antonio, just east of San Antonio, if you look at the Texas map. But these things support over 150 other species. Their hollows allowed water to go into the soil more deeply, and they allowed air to pass through. So even when it got hot and dry, that soil would stay cooler. And so I've been lucky enough to do some prairie dog relocation, where we've gone with some organizations that rescue the prairie dogs and then put them back. And it's one of the coolest things. And I actually talked my in-laws into it. And within 2 months, we had burrowing owls showing up. It was so cool. And that was one of the few times I've been able to tell my father-in-law, I told you so. So again, really quickly, this is a historic fire return interval, but if you see all this red stuff, you can see how much the United States burned fairly regularly. And again, the deeper the red, the more frequent. So here, very frequent. Here in Central Texas, every 3 to 5 years, there was a fire happening. There are some places where it didn't happen. So Maine, if you didn't want to deal with fire, go to Maine. But now, again, because everything's out of whack, they're starting to experience fires in those areas that historically weren't, and that's even more damaging. But fire was a big key, so we've got to start to redefine and take our fear away from that. And again, another big thing that we talked about why grasslands are so important. Everybody's been focused on planting trees for so long. That was, if you love Mother Nature, plant a tree. But one of the worst things you can do, and this is blocked, but it says, bad science, planting frenzy misses the grasslands for the trees. Because we don't have the fire and the grazers anymore, it is becoming a woody thicket already. And again, that's that fuel buildup. So trees aren't bad. And it's like the ash juniper. They're great native species, but they're something that's sort of out of whack now. Hackberries, all that. We go do surveys for Travis County, City of Austin, all that. I walk through more thickets that it's smilax and like a whole bunch of branches. It really hurts to get through, but it's just this, it's a landscape now that hasn't had any sort of management. So really we need to start thinking about this herbaceous restoration, because it really is key. And again, right plant, right place, right? That's such a great phrase, which tends to guide you just in general gardening. But we need to think about that on a ecological scale. Again, this is the Southeastern Grasslands Initiative, which is now the Institute. But they're going in and documenting grasslands all over the Southeast because they're sick and tired. Dr. Dwayne Estes, who's known as the Prairie Preacher, is sick and tired of people focusing on trees so much and really wants to get in. This area has some of the most highest biodiversity in terms of endemic species, and that's flora and fauna. And it's really amazing. It's something that just people didn't know. And partially that's because this was settled so early. Thomas Jefferson writes letters to a friend in France or something saying, well, he didn't say our native grasses, but he says our grasses are Timothy, Lucerne, I think like guinea grass or something. That's like 1783. Like they're already starting to jack up the landscape so much because like why it's a mercantilist sort of approach. They want to extract as much resources as they can. So the land's only as valuable as what sort of things you can extract from it. So they're really getting in there and digging in and redefining this area, which is really exciting. Dr. Reed nods this too. And again, now more people are working with indigenous cultures that have been sitting here saying, hey, stupids, we know how to do this. We've been doing this our entire for our, our forefathers and forefathers. There's folks, tribes up in Wisconsin that are so effective in their forest management that their trees are getting so big that they don't even know what to do with it. So it's really reaching out to some of this past knowledge, especially some of these cultures who they've had their finger on the pulse of the land because they evolved, they grew with it, as opposed to a lot of us folks who showed up late in the game. If you want to know again about some great sort of understanding about these disturbance events, the ecology management prairies in the central United States sounds like it's really boring. It takes a really diverse topic and boils it down into little bite-sized chapters. It's awesome. It's really helpful. Chris Heltzer is also an awesome guy, landscape ecologist. I can't remember his website, but he takes some amazing photos. He works for the Nature Conservancy, and he's a super guy. And then the American Serengeti really talks and does a chapter on each of the flora that was in these areas. You start to understand this relationship. Okay, I promise we're gonna talk about pocket prairies here. So this is my house in East Austin. I bought this in 2007, before everything crashed and when they would still give a graduate student who just graduated a loan with nothing down. So I kind of lucked out on that. But we pulled up, I'd already started my prairie. I told my friend who was my real estate agent, I said, I want a big lot because I'm going to do prairie restoration. I want more land than house. So we'd already started doing some restoration back there. There was a little about 500 square foot home here. We pulled that down, but we recycled as much of it as we could into the new house. But I started by protecting all that back area and said, nobody goes back there, which you have to do with contractors because they don't care about plants. I said already started, so I have a boardwalk that leads out to my backyard. There was a shed that had been here, and this plastic you see, I'm solarizing my lawn. So solarizing, we'll get into a little bit, but you might have to utilize herbicides. A lot of people don't like that. I liken it to radiation's a terrible thing, but we do use that surgically at times. And it's the same thing, depending upon the invasive species that are growing on your land, you might have to look at utilizing that initially and then to switch over. If you want to go the organic route through solarizing, I had sprayed this with herbicide a couple of times. I put that down, but you have to pull that sheet up and water it again every 3 weeks or so because you want to create moldy, gross conditions. And I liken it to, you basically have to be ready to go in a boxing match with Muhammad Ali for like 12 rounds because site preparation is so key. You've got to deal with the seed bank. You've got to deal with things like Bermuda grass, which spread through rhizomes and stolons and seed. And you also want to do that because not only is it just a pain in the butt to have to try to achieve biodiversity through deferred maintenance, but a lot of these invasive species will hijack the biogeochemical profile of the soil. So example is like Johnson grass. Everybody in here, who hates Johnson grass? Yeah, all right. So that plant will put out a root exudate that will actually lock it into a bacteria community forever. And why that's important, I'll talk about a little bit, but bacteria dominant is an early successional sort of condition in terms of microbes. And we want our soils to evolve to have that mycorrhizae as well. So really quickly, there's my wife Bonnie. So we've taken that stuff off. We left it down for about a year. So when I do site prep, I do it for a year. Why? Because you have cool season and warm season species. So even if you knocked out the Bermuda, is anybody familiar with brome here at all? That's the worst. I hate it. So you've got to try to knock out those cool seasons too. So all of our clients will tell them if we were going to do like a pocket prairie or something, that we're going to use about a year if we can to get this right. But here you can see we've spread out some compost. We're working that into the soil. And then here's where that shed had been. So we removed all that stuff and we're working with the organic matter in there. Here I'm plugging in some later successional species like little blue stem, because if they're growing happily, that means they've established that symbiotic relationship. So by planting them, I'm hoping to inoculate the soils. Inoculates don't work for the most part, but if in this condition that they can be more effective. You're probably gonna have some mortality, but they'll start to catch on and then things will start to cook. Again, we water, I'll go over the irrigation schedule, but you want to be really heavy with the water up front. But that's again to mimic a good wet year. And then you can see it growing in. So we've got early successional purple 3 on. So initially I done my pocket prairie with grasses because we were going to have kids. You can see the new house is being built. I wanted to be able to have like a mid-grass condition so they could at least get in there. And this was my tall grass prairie with a lot more forbs that we weren't going to get in. And here you can see this growing in again. Bonnie hates this picture because I show her butt all the time. But well, I have to point it out. I think it's a great butt. So right here you can see we've got some purple 3 on and Indian blanket, pink primrose. There's some primrose. There's some purple prairie verbena and some other tall grasses. But this looks completely different now. But the beautiful thing about it, again, it changes year after year. It's never the same. Here I'd had put in some California poppy just to try those out. They'll stay there if I put them, but they won't really reseed. But they're a wonderful, wonderful species. There is a native perennial poppy that I can't remember. I think it was the Mexican poppy. That's one that's great and would have kind of been in this neck of the woods, but it's really hard to get. I know we had it at the Wildflower Center a couple of times. But again, it's just changing all the time. Now you can see some solidagos coming up here. We've got the Engelmann daisy. I've got some little blue here. There's some Eastern gamma, some Brazos penstemon right there, wild foxglove. But it's my little lab. Like I go out there and hack away at it. You know, these are not your grandmother's rose garden. You got to go out there and be the bison. And the more you hack away at it and change it up and throw it curveballs, the more it's going to love you for it. I also got into native freshwater fish. Don't let me go down this rabbit hole for too long. But I decided to install this feature. We have rainwater cisterns that we collect from the house. So I have 2 500-gallon cisterns on the side. So that's what I use to fill that with. And I got to do some wetland plants, but I got to get addicted to freshwater fish. But it's really cool because now we have leopard frogs in there. It's really awesome. But we've got this bergamot here. Again, just changing year after year after year. And again, snowpocalypse occurred. Prairie didn't give a care. Trees hammered. A lot of them didn't make it. The grasslands popped back. They didn't even know what happened. And when you do this stuff, you know, there's a lot of opinions out there, as if nobody knew this, but you know, is just go native, just do this. I'm sort of a middle ground, right? So my wife, we started to have kids, and she wanted more of a traditional lawn from them to play. So, and some of the best and most beautiful juxtapositions can be these sort of formal versus wild landscapes. But we had this area, we had a big American elm, and you know, I just said, we'll do a patch. We had to do St. Augustine because of the shade, but I said, I'll do this patch here. And if it goes in a drought, I'm not going to water it. We'll replace it or whatever. So you can do some of these juxtapositions. And you know, I've got big blue stem now next to this stuff. So, you know, don't feel like you know, if you want to be puritanical, that's fine. But, you know, each of these offers you a little bit of opportunity. And we always say it's a yes and approach. I feel that's the best way, right? It's not either or, it's yes and. How do we work together and come up with some solutions? Again, seasons, Benjamin Vogt, who's awesome gentleman. I interviewed him last year at Central Texas Gardener. This is his little area. I love it. He lives in the HOA cul-de-sac sort of community, and he's got his wild prairie going. But you can see his really, we don't have a lot of seasons here. We have, let's see, we have summer, we have fummer, we have wummer, and we have spring. So, but he's really got some great seasonal pictures on his. He's just put out a book about Prairie Up, which is a good guide. There's a lot of species in there that range up. He's like in Nebraska, but that range down here. But there's some that you would need to look at. But again, I love just seeing this juxtaposition again, all these mowed lawns, and he's got this just beautiful thing. So when you start to do pocket prairie work, the first thing you want to know is what grew there first. What was that historic climax community? And your best tool is the soil, the web soil survey. So this is anybody familiar with this at all? It's a free thing. You paid for it with your taxes. God bless taxes. And I didn't say Texas, I said taxes. What's that?
Shut down in previous years, they actually shut down the shutdowns.
Yes. No, it's been online. I've been really scared about that, but it hasn't come down yet. I think the wrath of plant nerds keeps them in check. But so you can come and pull a map. I'll walk you through. We're not going to do every step for step, but you'll look at your site. Some sites have a lot of soils. Some might be really simple. So this might be you in here, but you'll draw an area of interest, go to this area, and it'll say like BOF, and you'll see that's a bracket rock outcrop real complex. And then it has these ecological communities in there. And you start to click on view all ecological sites, and it will essentially show you the site in its healthiest and then the site as it goes down the drain in terms of biodiversity. Juniper oak woodland scrub community. So mid tall grass community for this sample would have been its climax. Short grass savanna community might be where it's really overgrazed. Not all of them have this, but a lot of them do. So this is a very engineer sort of flow chart. But here's your historic climax condition, the savanna state, and the most diverse was the mid tall grass savanna community. Who knows the difference between savanna and a prairie? Here you go.
The savannas do have occasional trees.
Correct. So true prairie, 0 trees. But savannas and in this neck of the woods, trees, probably about 2 to 3 trees per acre. Don't hold me to that every inch of the square earth of Central Texas, but that's a general sort of condition that you would have seen. And again, talking about this pine forest of the Southeast, the same thing here. We had oak savannas that were post oak savannas, a lot of others that were they were essentially grasslands that just happened to have a couple of these trees in there. But so you'll see there's a mid tall grass savanna community. Then depending upon these little things I'll explain in a second, it might go down to mid short grass savanna community, then juniper oak woodland state or short grass. So these little arrows that you see, usually they'll have a legend down here and it'll say T1B. It will tell you why that happened. So overgrazing or fire, extinguished fire or overuse or whatever. So it will tell you what happened for it to move between these states, but it also lets you know what you might have to do to move it back to that condition. And then you can click on these areas, and again, mid shortgrass prairie community. So it starts to tell you about, hey, this historic plant climax plant community is a reference plant community. Fire, bison, prairie dogs are major factors maintaining the area's open prairie without impacts. Without their impacts on the woody component, the site can evolve to heavy canopy of large mesquite. The dominant midgrass is Cytosgrama, composing approximately 25% of the total composition. Other important midgrasses are Arizona cottontop, vine mesquite, tall dropseed, meadow dropseed, sand dropseed, silver bluestem, cane bluestem, white. Hey, we've got a list going here of stuff that I can put back on my land if I really want to do that. And it's going to work with the soils that I've got. Now, if you got urban soils, it'll say urban soil, which stands for we don't know what the hell's there. So, you just try to work with that. But for the most part, if you're not fighting against the conditions, you're working with it, that's where you're going to get your success. So this starts to tell you this wonderful information. And then when you scroll down further, this was developed for ranchers, right? They wanted to know their annual production pounds per acre. The native plants are they're like ice cream that's healthy for you, for cattle. That's the best thing that you could have. So they're wanting to know how much forage production they can get out of each of these species. But we're going to hippiefy this thing and hijack it to create prairies because we love prairies. So you'll scroll down and it will break it down to tall grasses, mid grasses, short grasses, cool season grasses. It'll have forbs, it'll have shrubs and trees and even vines. So here we go. We've got this community that we can aim towards. So when you do restoration, you don't have to be puritanical and get everything there. Guess what? You're not going to get, let's see, usually there's like fuzzy 3-snout bean. Like, where am I getting that? You're not. So, but you find all the stuff that you can, you start to cobble together your thing. And for a guide on this, if you want to know how to do this, you can just go to www. I'm just kidding. I'll put this up here because I hate when people do that. If you can go to the Blanco River Design Guidelines, which have now, we created this book with Texas and Parks and Wildlife in response to the Memorial Day floods on the Blanco River, because people were going and tearing up their land, and they had contractors saying, I'll fix your land, and then going in their riparian area with bulldozers and tearing it up. It's now, I think, called the Hill Country Design Guidelines, but you should be able to search it online. There's an appendix in the very back that sort of walks you through. They do change up the soil survey a little bit, but it sort of feels like Netscape era internet interface, and that sort of dates me. But it's fairly simple. Once you do it once or twice, it's easy peasy. Another big thing to talk about is invasive ID treatment site preparation. So like I was saying, if you're just starting this and you don't know all the plants, a really great way to start about it is just knowing your invasives, because there's a common cast of characters that you're going to have to deal with. I mean, whether you're in Houston or even Dallas, there's a lot. The Bahia grass isn't in Dallas, but there's a lot of common things that you're going to see. So you can really memorize those pretty easily. And there's a lot of resources, like City of Austin has some resources that will tell you, here's the really bad guys that we don't like in our neighborhood. There's other organizations that you can look out and search. Some of this common herbaceous invasive species, this area is King Ranch bluestem. Who hates that? I do. The bromes, so cheatgrass, rescue grass. There's nodding thistle, multi-star thistle. That hurts and I hate it. Bermuda grass, it really sucks. It was used to bring bedding for the slaves. So that's a really terrible legacy that people use to create their beautiful lawn. Deep-rooted sedge, nut sedge, crabgrass. So there is a really common cast of characters. So you don't have to kill yourself if you're not a huge plant ID person initially. You can learn these pretty well. The perennial rye, again, that's allelopathic. That can reduce native seed germination anywhere from like 24 to 36%. So you can go and find some of those resources. So again, we use herbicides when we need it. We try to do it surgically. We're not about just bombing a site every which way we can. If we can get around it, we will. But for the most part, if it's Bermuda or a lot of these, we're going to have to go this route. So also just know how you want to go about it. Because again, if you go the organic route, it's going to take even longer to really knock that out. But there's a lot of resources through, again, I can share this part with y'all, but there's another areas that really talk about this, because you want to be safe. Yes, they're not great, but they are necessary sometimes, especially if you've got like mesquite dominated area. You're probably gonna have to look at using triclopyr or something like that. And again, a lot of these resources, they will break it down for you and sort of tell you what you need to be looking at, what rates you might need to apply, when to apply it. So it's an important tool to have, because if we allow those to persist, you're eventually either going to see your biodiversity drop off and them just come back in there again. And again, they're not invasive for no reason. But you know, it's a tool in your you know, Batman's bat belt that you might have to use every once in a while. So the soil work too, really important to understand that soils, if you look at them under a microscope, are like 45–50% void space, or they should be. Why is that? Because that allows water to get in and air to get in so that plants can breathe, respirate. A lot of urban soils, especially if you had, you know, you live in you know, any area where it's built out, I can guarantee the contractors compacted your soil to all get out because they didn't care when they're building it. And then what they come is they afterwards they just slap stuff down on it, turf, grass, whatever. That's why the turf grasses, even the non-native ones, are so thirsty as well, because the water can't get down. They can't develop root systems. Not that they have that long of them, but that's a big problem. So we want to talk about the soils. Soils uh, are a healthy soil. If you're looking at a mineral soil, it's going to have a O horizon. So that's mainly broken down organic material. Then you get into the A horizon. And so that's the mineral soil component mixed with the organic matter. And then you start to get these lower horizons till you finally get to the parent bedrock, like whatever's making up that A horizon. And here it's limestone. So you get a lot of basic soil. So really understanding what those soils are like. And then again, the life in the soils. An acre of living topsoil can has more life in it like than an ocean almost. I mean, just you know, 1,500 pounds of bacteria. Think of that. 1,500 pounds of things that you can only see if you look at them under a microscope. I mean, it is absolutely amazing. We know more about, you know, outer space than we do the food web, because we can only grow about 1% in the lab. So we understand it, but we don't know it quite enough. And again, why is that important? Because this is from Jim Harris's soil microbial communities and restoration ecology facilitator to followers. If you look at how soils evolve over time, you start with a raw soil, there's no microbes. You come to an immature grassland condition, it's bacteria dominant. So that's the fungal bacteria ratio. It's bacteria dominant. Late grassland, so mature grassland, is like that 50-50 sweet spot between fungi and bacteria. And as we start to go towards a woodland, it becomes solely fungal dominant for the most part. So when we're looking to do pocket prairies, we're really wanting to promote that. And so that's why that organic matter is important, but that's why that soil health is so important as well. And so we use compost to create that instant O horizon. But again, I can talk to this about a million years, but a lot of the compost now is not good. It's made to the U.S. Composting Council standards, which essentially gives you something that doesn't have fecal coliform, yay, doesn't have heavy metals, yay, but it is made in this process called windrowing. And windrowing has this big machine. They have like a 6-foot wide by 6-foot tall pile. And it allows them to turn, they just drive this machine over and it turns the material and turns the material and turns the material. So it cooks it really well, but it doesn't allow fungal development because that hyphae can't grow. So that would be like you trying to grow and then me coming and taking a finger off one day and then a toe and then maybe an arm. You're just not going to make it. So it's a great product for your lawn and your garden. It's not that it's bad, but it's not going to get us that instant food web that we want. Static pile compost is the best. There's few people that do this Nature's Way, and Conroe does. It's really expensive. They sell out every year. You want to know why? Because they got good stuff. So you're going to start with stuff that's probably going to be not that great. And again, they don't provide you any test data. So they're not going to tell you any nutrient profile. Why? Because in the state of Texas, if they tell you anything about nutrients, then they get regulated like a fertilizer company, which is much more stringent. So they don't tell you no regulation. That just meets the U.S. Composting Council. So again, no heavy metals, no fecal coliform, but there's no life in there. But you can get the stuff tested, but for the most part, you're going to see there's just a lot of bacteria and nothing else. But we're still going to use compost because it's good. It's organic matter. It's going to give us improvement of structure. more pore space. We're going to hold on to more water. You're starting that process, and you're only going to incorporate it within the 1 to 3 top inches of your soil. So that image that I showed you of Bonnie when she was sort of working the compost that we just put out in our area, you don't want to till really deep after you've spent a year getting that site ready, because you're going to pull up a lot of invasive seed bank, and then you're going to kind of be back where you were. So it's really just about getting that top for 1 to 3 inches. If you have really terribly compacted soils, you might have to go deeper, but this is just assuming that, you know, you're not super compacted concrete. Other amendments we're going to add, because the compost isn't fully cooked, things like biochar. We are starting to utilize that in every project now. Why? Well, we talked about, we had historic fires here every 3 to 5 years. There was a charcoal buildup, which has a huge impact on soil food web. It also does really great. It makes the nutrients more available, and again, gives you more moisture retention. So we're starting to use biochar in our prairie restorations, even large scale now. Horticultural molasses is really great. That'll feed the good bacteria. Organic fertilizer, if you fertilize, don't fertilize a lot. The worst thing you can do is put a, you know, triple 13 out there, synthetic miracle grow. Our plants evolved in what agronomists would call nutrient poor conditions. We've been on several projects where a soil scientist was hired, and they're like, well, we're gonna have to do a fertilizer regime, and it's gonna add like $2 to $3 million to the project. And we're like, no, you don't do that. You can put some organic fertilizer out there, and that's not really for the plants, that's more for the soil. Organic fertilizer feeds the soil food web. And yes, it will feed the plant, but it's really the soil that will feed. Synthetically manufactured fertilizer does not feed the soil. So you really want to come up with your organic fertilizer. Microlife is a great one. I'll show you that next. Humic acid, that's your component to really start to get that fungal growth going. So some of these products have all of these in one. So Microlife is a really good granular one that'll hang around for 30 days or so, but it has humic acid. It also has inoculants. And again, I wouldn't put a lot of money in trying to inoculate my my land with a powdered inoculant, because they can't really, if you look under the microscope, you might see the thing there, but it's not really alive. It could be a dormant or dead spore. I've talked to a number of mycologists at the ASLA conventions, and they said the only true effective inoculant is if you take soil from a healthy condition and bring some of that over, you might start to have some effects. But we don't want to promote that, because we don't want everybody going to healthy sites and then doing that, because that, you know, it's like going and harvest a rare plant off of something because you just have to have it. So we don't want to do that. But this is a great organic. There are liquid ones as well. There's Vermiplex, which is made out of earthworm castings, and these others. But you can search around. But you'll all notice they have in common is just a low NPK or macro. You don't need a lot. You're really wanting to make sure that you're addressing the soil food web. Now you'll also take a soil survey, and you can send that off to the extension office, and they might say your nitrogen's 0. Well, okay, then we need to look at some sort of regime to get that up. But on those tests for the soil documents, you need to look and say, okay, we're not the critical level. We're not trying to grow, you know, alfalfa or something like that. We're trying to grow prairie. And again, why? Because we want these roots to show up, because they're going to mean less watering. They're going to mean healthier soils. They're going to mean so much stuff. So seeding, you have 2 windows for seeding. If you want, the general sort of rule of thumb is wildflowers. So we had mid-September, but now September is a sort of new August. But October to November 17th is sort of our fall window now that we'll do for forbs. If you really want a lot of wildflowers, that's when you want to seed that. Spring, you can do annual grasses or grasses and annual wildflowers, and that's sort of March 1st, and it can go to May. These windows can expand and contract based on what the climate's doing. But if you stick into these, you're going to have the best results for sure. And again, with your mixes, you want to think, you know, do I know all these? I'm just starting out this. I really want to do this. I don't know. We'll keep it simple, right? You go to Native American seed, and maybe we're just going to order some side oats. go to Douglas King seed and get some hooded windmill grass, and then get, you know, Texas mix that only has, you know, several species in there. And that way you just know what I've put in there. I've seen a lot of people fail because they're really excited about this, but then they put in like a 70 species mix and they don't know what's going on, right? That would be like me trying to make a computer or something. But if you know what you're doing a little bit, you can do the diverse mix. So there's, like I said, there's some of these, like the Blackland Prairie mix that Native American Seed has, Eastern Savannah. Some of them, you know, have a ton of species in there. Douglas King Seed has a lot of some really great species that are directly from native germplasms, and you can, you know, mix it up. Look at, you know, there's Turner Seed and Bamert. I can't remember. I think Bamert maybe sells vine mesquite, really cool grass. Likes little wetter conditions, but there's a number of retailers out there, and we try to source within a 250-mile radius if we can. Why? Because there's species that grow in Virginia. It's the exact same species that grows here, but if I bring that genotype from Virginia to here, it's probably going to die. Why? Because it's evolved with more precipitation, cooler weather, and maybe more of a southern drawl. So, you know, you just need to try to source as local as you can. Having said that, there's some species like silphium, some compass plants that I really want to get on projects. I haven't been able to locate that close in, so I'll go further afield. But try to make your core mix closely sourced. And so you can see some of the seeds when we put it in. We want to be careful about integrating. A lot of people, one of the worst things they do is they put down seed and then they're like, I got to get it 5 feet in the soil, and they dig it down. If you bury a seed deeper than twice its width and diameter, it doesn't have the metabolic energy to make it up and through. So, and why is that important? Because some of these seeds are really small, like Indian paintbrush is like the period at the end of a sentence, you know, and it's expensive. But you know, we have like Eastern Gamma, it's like a corn kernel. So all you want to do when you put it out there is you want to roughen your soil. So strangely enough, fires keep happening in my prairie. I am wildland firefighter trained, so I know what I'm doing, but I am a disturbance. I am the true buffalo or bison. But we will, from time to time, make a little patch, and we'll roughen up the soil. So these are my unpaid interns, free labor, and not really free. They're very expensive labor, actually. Retract that statement. But you know, you're just going to roughen the soil a bit, and then you're going to sprinkle it like fairy dust, like we say. You just get it out there, and it, you know, if it's high wind, some of it's really fluffy, it might go. You might need to go a little bit lower, but you just want to mix it around, and then you come back with a rake or a harrow or a tree branch, and then just kind of, and you walk around on it too. You just want to get good soil seed contact. We're not really trying to bury it a ton. And then again, like I'll always plant later successional species, because I'm trying to get that soil food web kick-started. And for me too, that's a target for me, little blue stem, because the historic climax condition said on my land that was the jam. So I've been working on that. I probably put in like 40 in here and like 5 survived. So it's starting to happen. I'm starting to see the Indian grass come and others, but it's taking time. So a lot of the times, you know, insanity, the definition of insanity is you're doing the same things. They're doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Well, that's not necessarily true here. Sometimes, you know, if you're doing something idiotic, don't keep doing it. But sometimes you're going to have to keep throwing some things there before you start to see that momentum. Because again, this is something that's going to evolve over time. And again, you can see some of these mixes. So I was talking about that compass plant. I sourced that further out, pretty far out. But I wanted to do that too because that's a plant that can live 100 years. A little herbaceous plant. You know, it looks like a sunflower to the untrained eye, but can live 100 years. And I've had my youngest son, Finn, go and plant some of these at one of my projects because I want him to be able to go back and say, you know, my dad and I did that. So some bulletproof species, regardless, that if you want to do a pocket prairie, these are ones that will perform very well for you. Sidus grama, which is, of course, the state grass of Texas. But silver blue stem, you can source that. I think it's from Turner Seed. It's not as widely available. That is one of the best rock star pioneer plants. It looks absolutely beautiful. And it just rocks out. Green Sprangletop's a great early successional. Blue Grama, depending upon the drainage of your soil, might or might not make it. Buffalo grass, curly mesquite. I think curly mesquite outperforms buffalo grass by a million yards. But it's more expensive because it's harder to harvest. But Texas grama is a great one to get into in the short grass. The slender grama is awesome. The bristle grasses. But these are really wonderful. Little barley, Hordeum Bacillum, like get into that. That's a great cool season grass. It's beautiful. And man, it just goes bonkers. Tall grasses, again, the purple top's really great. Switchgrass is pretty easy. Eastern gamma grass, I have to really hack that back because it takes off. But it's wonderful. A lot of those, you all are all plant nerds. You're very familiar. Cowpen daisy, be careful. It can get, if it gets happy, you're surrounded by a lot of yellow flowers. But tall poppy mallow and all these. But this is a really good sort of starter's kit if you want to think about some that just say like I need some bulletproof stuff. So erosion, really quickly, once you do, we have to talk to, construction companies and all that. They have to do SWIP measures for stormwater control and erosion. Once you start this process, your site's going to be vulnerable until that vegetation gets established. So just know that. But your maintenance, you want to make sure that nothing's coming in and taking over. So you have to take it back to that. But just know that, yes, initially your site will be vulnerable where it's bare soil. But if you get the things going, they will grow very quickly. We get germination within 3 days if we're watering really well. And steep slopes, you might have to do some more physical manipulation. So steep slopes. Have you ever done steep slopes? Why, yes, I have. This is on the Colorado River in Austin. They had a bluff and they woke up one day. There used to be trees behind their house. They woke up one day in their bedroom. There's all the sunshine. And they're like, what is going on? They stepped outside and their land used to come out to here and it had just collapsed. So they and their bedrooms right here, and they're like, "Oh my God!" So they it wasn't close enough to qualify for help from the city, so they had to sort of do this on themselves. So they reached out to myself, and we brought in engineers, and so they brought it back, made it stable. They had to put in some serious erosion control blanket with soil nails in there. But then in that, we just got this jute core fiber rolls, and then we made terraces with soil behind that, and then started the process with some riparian restoration to really get into that and anchor that site. So you can do it with very steep soils as well, but just know that we want to try to mitigate any sort of soil loss. And again, when we're watering, that first 10 days with seed, do not let it dry out. Soak it. You might do it twice a day. Soak it really, really good. The next 3 weeks, you're going to do every other day. Deep watering. Like if you can mimic a 1-inch rain event, that's great. Next 2 weeks after that, you do twice a week. Again, a good deep watering. Then you can back off and you can sort of see if Mother Nature's okay and you get some rains, then you might be good to go. But it's always good that first year to have the ability to go back and give it a little bit of love if it's needed. But again, this is a little front area where I've cleared an area and I've seed it regularly. And here, you can see it popping back up. I don't know where that went from. Anyway, I had another slide, but anywho, but yeah, so a lot of people too, just about the watering really quickly. Water conservation is a big thing, right? We want to do the right thing, but I'm of the opinion that it's okay. It's not okay to water 8,000 tons a day so you have St. Augustine lawn. It is okay to utilize water to establish habitat, because we have to start thinking about inclusive landscapes that support other species other than just ourselves. We've got to get away from how does this benefit me, and that's the in line. It's something about how can we give back and be inclusive, and I know that's a bad word nowadays, but something that looks out and actually helps other things. And again, like I say on the show, adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience. And I'll show you this area. This is a moonscape. This is my other director at the Wildflower Center, Steve Windhager. He's now the director at the Santa Barbara Garden. You can see this is a moonscape. It's overgrazed, just rocky stuff. So he started his process. So this is September 1999. This is all seeded because, again, seeding is your most cost-effective way to get a lot of diversity and get a lot of coverage. So this is a year. And here's year 2, year 3. Here are these amazing mastodons showing up, and no, it's just his dogs. And then here's, about 5 years. So it takes some time to get in. You have to have patience, but you can have this complete change, a fundamental different change. This thing, resources are leaving, nutrients rolling off every time it rains, soil going away, getting even worse. It's water not going down in the soil, going off and away. This landscape is retaining resources and driving a system that, again, is going to support other life, but is a much healthier component. It's going to be a heck of a lot cooler in this landscape than it is here when it's 113 degrees. So again, time is really, really key to that. And then again, maintenance and weeding when you get into it. Again, fires keep happening on my landscape, strangely enough, but it's okay to get in there and be rough with it. I want to state that to you. Do not worry about getting in there with a baseball bat and machete. If you want to Rambo it and put a headband on, like, feel free, go, because these are disturbance driven ecosystems. Here's that area. I burned the crap out of it with a prickly pear burner. And then here it is about a month later. It loves it. It needs that interaction. It's beckoning you to come and interact with it. Be a part of me again. And again, you just see every year it's different. So, we have a lot of clients that will say one year, oh my God, the Maximilian sunflower is taking over. Hold on, just be patient. Oh my God, the greens is nothing but green sprangle top. Hold on, things are cooking. And it will change over time. Then it will be, oh my God, there's no Maximilian sunflower. So you just gotta, it's okay, go with the flow. And again, this is that same area. So early spring and then late summer too, there's a dynamic. The grasses are the dominants in late summer. So again, it's going to keep changing. Then it's going to go dormant. It's going to get brown and crispy. That's okay. You want to dethatch that every March, late February, March. So by dethatching, I mean removing all this stuff. So organic material is really good, but remember the bison and the fire and the other critters used to thin that out regularly. So you don't have to do it every single year, but if you let this build up time and time, it's going to sort of mulch itself out of existence too. And that's what those abiotic and biotic pressures also did for the landscape. And again, when I was talking about fuel buildup, it starts as this, which isn't a big deal, but then you get the woody encroachment, and then you get a woody thicket, and then you go from 1 hour fuels, so stuff that dries out and will burn within an hour, to if you have 10-hour fuels like a log, or 100-hour fuels, those things catch on fire, it's scary. So you'll need to do that. But again, it's going to change all over time. And again, dormancy is a virtue. We have to get down with brown. Okay, Coco Chanel in the 30s took black and brown and made it fashionable. We've got to do that with our landscapes. You are really fighting. It's not even an uphill battle. It's not even a battle. You're just losing if you're trying to keep everything green all year round here. And if you just moved here, you're not loser. You don't know about this yet. But dormancy it happens for a reason, and it's the plants being smart of say, I'm not going to expend all these resources to try to live. I'm going to go to sleep for a while. And again, too, in the winter or it's the summer, there's summer dormancy, there's winter dormancy. This stuff that people complain about, that is resources out the U-Haul for other species. They overwinter in the pithy stems, bees, solitary native bees. Other species, that's nesting material. That, I mean, this is, you know, we see brown, but other species look out at this and they are just like, oh, thank God. Where has this been? So get down with brown. And again, really quickly, climate change is happening. Y'all all know this, you're a plant nerd. Sometimes I gotta let people know that stuff's getting real. And I see it out there all the time that I go to natural lands. Oh, they've been preserved. It's King Ranch bluestem and ash juniper. You know, and those aren't resilient landscapes. These diverse landscapes are ones that will take a licking and keep on ticking. These others, once those sort of conditions change, we're in trouble. So doing this sort of work, you really are contributing. And again, think about Ptolemy's book, Nature's Best Hope. When you really feel like, oh my God, what can one person do? Well, maybe you're only doing what you're doing, but if we're all doing it together collectively, that is a massive impact. And again, really quickly, just show you with carbon dioxide storage. There's all this research, but the big thing, look at this. This is UC Davis research. When applied to 5 billion hectares of degraded range lands and agricultural soils and former wild grasslands. So if we restored all of our prairies, I'm not saying this is possible, but if we did, you could return 10 or more gigatons of excess atmospheric carbon to soils annually and lower greenhouse gas concentrations to pre-industrial levels in a matter of decades. They lock that soil. You hear things about trees. Trees are wonderful. They might hold on to more carbon initially, but the problem is when they die, that's released back in the atmosphere. Grassland holds it unless some idiot comes by and digs it up. It is stored and locked away. So, I mean, grasslands really can save us. And furthermore, they found that the current path of global carbon emissions reveals grasslands as the only viable net carbon dioxide sink through 2101. So get to doing pocket prairies and the rewards. This is just my pictures now. I'm just going to show you my proud kids. But you know, you get to interact. This is the perfume ball. This is a little out of focus. But the diversity you start to see over time. Again, it's the woodsman looks at a square mile and sees only grass, but the prairie person looks at a square foot or meter and sees a universe. And these are the things that we're missing out on. And these are, you know, I'm originally from Mississippi. There's one thing I found out pretty fast is there's one thing that Texans love. It's Texas. You can't get more Texas than this. This is millions of years of ecology. The grandelias, they're awesome. If you want a plant that does not have to have any water whatsoever, go get some of this seed off the roadside. It's great. Throw it out. It will rock your world. And then you're going to start to see all these critters coming back too. Like you really start to see the life. It's not just about, I mean, so this is the slippery slope. I told you all about the dang fish, but I mean, you know, you start with the plants, you know, and when I started working the wildfire center, it was all about the plants. I was learning this whole new world. It was so exciting. It was amazing. And then one of the staff members was about to leave to get his doctorate in ornithology. And he was like, dude, have you ever really checked out birds? I was like, well, I like birds. He's like, come on with me. We go walking around. Okay, I love birds now. I mean, now I'm out there like, holy crap! Like we've had painted bunting showing up in our yard that just were not there whatsoever. I mean, my wife is. I'm usually yelling about something obscure, and she's like, "Oh God, what's happening again?" But you know what I love about my children too is they get to go out in our yard, and it's not just this static thing. They get to go down there and explore. I can tell you how many times they've come back with mice and sphinx mosses and snakes and you know it's truly amazing. And again, if you can get with it, this is Linda Watson. She's in Lubbock. She rescues prairie dogs. She's awesome. She is probably has the driest delivery that you've ever had of any human. I asked her, I said, how'd you get into this, Linda? And she was like, well, I used to be a bad alcoholic. I was like, well, I guess this is a good, switch for you. Okay. But she's whole life is nothing but prairie dogs. And again, we did this out at my in-laws ranch in Brady, Texas. And, you know, I talked my father-in-law into clearing about 2 acres And I said, just can we do this? And I wish I had a picture of the burrowing owls, but they just started showing up. I mean, it's just, if you start doing this really does have an impact. So, I mean, I think this quote really sums up too, I'm about done, but it's really just a question of how we want to move forward in life, right? And embracing creative unpredictability, practicing what I call the art of becoming. Like prairies really start to let you learn what it means to be in a way, but it also lets you connect with others. And so there's a way forward where it's a yes and pocket prairies are going to help you embrace that. So any questions? Sorry, there's a lot of stuff. I have ADHD too, if you can't tell, so I might not have been a straight narrative, but joke's on y'all. Yes, ma'am.
The Bush Library area, and you said temporary irrigation. You talked about seeding and watering twice a day. How are you doing that on a large, how are you watering seeds in acres?
Yes. So they will set up a surface like PVC irrigation system. And then they will have the ability, because some of these like Bush, it's not every single project. So there's some ranch land stuff that we do that what you do is you do all the stuff that you need to, and then you do this and you pray for rain. And you know that there's a good chance you're going to have to reseed again until we finally hit that good year. But there's a number of these, if there are more in urban areas where they have access to the water so they can tap in, but they'll just have it. And they've done an estimate there at Bush. They save over 6 million gallons of water every year because they just don't water it. And it's really it's a paradigm shift, the way people think about the landscape. But a lot of them go out there and they're just like, oh, this must be really intense. And they're, no, there's no water whatsoever. And then some of it's just interacting with what people feel is weedy and snaky. I had one time we go out there and do quarterly inspections each year to help them with their maintenance and sort of give them a report. Oh, here, this invasive has shown up. But they also have a lot of native volunteers, which I didn't talk about, but that will probably and hopefully happen to you in your pocket prairie. You have these volunteers show up and you're like, what in the world is this? And it's the tree fuzzy snout bean that I can see. All right. But that means that you have connectivity with other healthy patches and that those are being brought in. But there's some people that just at first don't get it. And one time I was touring with Mrs. Bush and we're walking around, and then this lady with a big old bouffant hairdo came up to me and just said, what the hell? What is going on? What is this? It just looked like a weedy mess to her because it wasn't in the height of spring and it wasn't where it was just blowing up. We had a lot of people at the Wildflower Center go out there and say like, well, where in the hell are the wildflowers? Well, it's August, it's like go to Barton Springs or something. But she said, what the hell are you doing to Mrs. Bush right here? This is just terrible. And I set her down and I talked to her for about 20 minutes and said, well, actually, I told her a story about restoring the ranch land and all that. And then after that, she said, I've never thought about it that way. So I've got a good loud voice, so no worries. But on those projects, we can not all that happens, but like those that are spending millions to do this sort of thing, they are willing to pay for. They're willing to pay for, if they're making that investment just for that year. So
Yeah, PVC pipe.
on the surface, yes, ma'am. And
Pull it up.
they just cut it and it's gone. That's it. Yes, ma'am.
Side of my yard, I have decomposed granite.
Yep.
Um,
Blue bonnets.
Blue bonnets love
They
it.
love DG.
So, Mexican feathergrass.
Yes.
I've tried throwing down some purple top and little blue stem, and so far nothing.
So the purple top tends to like a little bit more moisture. I would look at, because that's what really drains a lot. and you see like people try to do xeric landscapes, which are really difficult. That's like really high maintenance here because we get too much water for them to truly be xeric landscapes, and so you'll get they become weed issues or whatever. But you've created a very system that's really drains a lot. So I would plug into plants that like that, like bluebonnet, or the feather grass will go nuts, obviously. Yeah, globe mallow would be a great one. Any of those that lean a little bit more towards the xeric would be good. Look at more westerly species. It would probably be just fine for you.
Maybe not quite pocket prairie, but
Well, you could, I mean, no, you could still look at it. You're just maybe you've created a novel ecosystem sort of in your yard. So just look at uh, uh, reference conditions and say, okay, well, I might sort of pull from that. So maybe look at stuff that might be a little bit more West Texas. Yes, ma'am. Oh, well, so I spray it. I mean, I nuke it. Well, there's glyphosate, but they're stopped selling that. There is fluazafop P butyl, which is known by the brand name as Fusilade 2. And you have to use a non-ionic surfactant with it, which is a fancy word for soap, so it sticks to it. But really cool at bush, because in an urban area, you're constantly going to have pressure from invasives because you're surrounded by invasives. And you're going to have to reseed your pocket prairie and put stuff into it because they are islands essentially. And all research points to they'll have a decline in biodiversity over time just because they're not replenished. So you again be the bison, be the cedar, be all of that. But a really cool thing at Bush Presidential Center, so that has a habiturf in there. So that's curly mesquite, blue grama, and buffalo grass. They were getting Bermuda starting to come in on some of the sides. So always the edges are where the invasives try to come in. And that's why when you do some of this stuff too, the more interior space you can give it tends to work out better. But having said that, the maintenance company was using glyphosate and that was just killing everything. It was big holes. And so they said, man, Mrs. Bush doesn't like this. I agree, it's ugly. So I just said, well, let's just switch to Fusilade 2, which is a grass-specific herbicide. So some of these herbicides are broadleaf specific and grass specific, but some of them still do collateral damage. But I just said, we'll just try this out. The Fusilade 2 killed the Bermuda, but didn't infect the habiturf. So, yeah.
I'm trying to do a food forest.
Okay.
Want to plant natives and things for us to eat and the wildlife.
Sure. So yeah, the food forest is a whole different kind of condition and idea. I think again, yes, and so if you're going to have a lot of shade from that, you can still look to shade tolerant species like inland sea oats and others, the coral bean and or not what is it, the coral berry. But just look to, you can do that, something like that. It's just in doing one thing, then what conditions does that create that could affect the open?
The herbicides.
You shouldn't have to do it. So I'm not, like, my yard was pigweed and Bermuda and brome. That's it. And I hit it a couple of times and then I solarized it and then I've knocked it out for a year. But I knocked it out and then I now it's to where I no Bermuda, nothing like that. I have to hand pick some brome every once in a while, but I don't, you don't have to become dependent upon that, but that's because that preparation, that's what's key. And then you're going to find a seed bank for a little while, but for the most part, if you get on top of it, if it explodes, then that's where you're in trouble. But you can also, we've had the 13,000 square foot prairie that I showed you downtown Austin with that green roof. He had some little sprigs of Bermuda coming in. I have a little bottle that I have of glyphosate in it and it has a little brush and I'll just pick it and wick it on there. I'm not going to spray it everywhere and then I'll set it down and then I might have to do that a couple times. So I wear gloves and all that sort of thing. but you can totally do that. So the idea is that you're not going to be doing that forever. It's just at the beginning because you cannot manually remove Johnson grass or Bermuda grass. And if you can, please tell me how to do it. But because it's so difficult. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a woodland quote from or who?
That's from Bill Holm, Billholm. And he's an author out of Minnesota. He was a big friend of the, Garrison Keillor, the Prairie Home Companion. So, yeah, it's a great quote. He's not really writing about prairies as much as the place, but he had that, and it's just like, gadzooks, that is a good quote. Yes, ma'am.
What are your thoughts of using the cardboard and wood mulch?
Yeah, so cardboard and wood's great. So we've done that. So that again, that 13,000 square foot prairie, we did a treatment with glyphosate, and then when we put down mulch, which you can, and the cardboard too, I'll put down 8 to 10 inches of mulch. And you can make it cheaper by asking for single grind mulch. So to get that really nice mulch you use in your beds, they grind it a number of times. It's going to be really chunky looking, and you're not going to walk out there barefooted. But you can do that, and then you can spot spray if anything pops up. But yes, that's a great way to go about it too. It's just you want that time. And so the solarizing, I didn't get into a ton, but you have to use no thinner than a 6 millimeter thick plastic sheet, which you can get at Home Depot or whatever, that they sell like 20 by 100. And you can put it down. It's really effective. There's debates on it should be clear or black. It just doesn't matter. But the thing is, the keeper is you have to pull it up and spray it with water and then put it back down. You have to do that religiously for a while. It gets really stinky. It's terrible. And then if you leave it out too long, the sun will break it down. So if you don't do that, you totally do cardboard and thick mulch if you wanted to, but you still probably are going to have to spot treat a little bit. Any other questions? Or have I just scared everybody?
So now's the time to throw out seeds,
Yes.
but also leave things that have died
Mhm.
and don't pull that out until the spring.
I wouldn't do anything. I'd like weed whack or something like the end of February. Yeah, because again, that's just going to be nesting material and all that. And then the colors, the textures, like you still see the wind and all, it's something that, I really thoroughly enjoy because adds a whole other different dynamic during the winter. But again, warmer, where stuff still grows here unless we get another snow apocalypse. Yes, ma'am.
You were gonna mow. Like, when is the best time you think to mow?
To dethatch it would be late winter. We have some people that are in HOAs or something, and the summer dormancy happens, and then just make sure the seed is dropped, because we'll have a lot of people out there it's starting to fade, but they're still forming the seed. You're like, wait, no. So make sure it's good and crispy and brown, and the seeds dropped, and then you can take it out there if you really need to. But really, I just keep it up till late February or very beginning of March. But again, and another thing I have to say is I could really go on for this ever. And I'm actually working on a book about this for Texas A&M Press. So heterogeneity in terms of how you treat your prairie is great. If you do the same thing every year, it's not necessarily bad, but it's gonna favor certain species over others. And that fire research, I was talking about the Wildflower Center. So we have patches that are about 2 acres in size. There are about 52 of them, all with replications of 3, so we can have at the base minimum a trend established. But we do summer burn, we do winter burn, we do fall burn, we do summer mow, or we did summer mow, winter mow, and fall mow. And then we take the data, and if you ever want to go volunteer in the Wildflower Center and learn some really cool plants, There's transects and all these burn units. You get out there with a square meter on your hands and feet, and you're seeing bare ground, blah blah blah, like dominant species and all this sort of stuff. And it's really amazing. One plot right next to the other. This is a summer burn. This is a fall mow. Like uh, black-eyed Susan will just dominate on this one. And then like antelope horns and Indian blanket are dominating the other. So heterogeneity is really key too. You don't have to get out there and do it every single time. Don't feel bad about it because you're just be random, just go with the flow.
The trends, airy and conflict.
You can aerate. So if you don't have to disturb your soils unless they're really compacted. Having said that, if you want to air spade or aerate like that, it's not necessarily bad. One, it can be expensive, and like I was saying, you got to roughen the soil. So we'll do that mechanically on a lot of projects. But in certain areas where there's some beautiful trees and there's a critical root zone around that, we're not going to go in there and till in that. So we will have folks, arborists come in and air spade to loosen the soil for us. So it'll benefit the tree and everything else. So that's a great way to do it. It just tends to be a bit more expensive.
Something only there for a pollinator.
Oh yeah. So okay. If you're doing it for pollen, again, what's your goal? So you can, if it's pollinators, then yeah, you're going to think about, okay, well, I want to leave overwintering material. You want to do, yeah. Sure. So if that's the case, then yeah, you might want to do thirds and breaking up depending, but it just depends on how much size you got. If you don't have a lot of land like the plot in the front of my house, I just kind of do that every once in a while. But again, just tie it to your goals. Like what am I, if I'm just really wanting plant diversity and then we're going to see what happens, then, whatever. But if it's really tied to pollinator or something like that, then yeah, you might want to mix it up. And again, that heterogeneity and how you're doing that is going to be really cool because things will be growing in other areas that they might not. All right. Yeah.